Hey, good afternoon, Facebook watchers. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary with Larry Schmidt, candidate for Crawford County Commissioner in this spring's primary. Again, the primary, for those of us that think May in terms of Ohio primaries, is actually moved up, and it's St. Patrick's Day. So March 17th will be the primary, and we have a situation in Crawford County where one of our two seats is an open seat, and so there are four candidates interested in being nominated, and in the absence of an independent filing after that, they'll likely be our next county commissioner. So it's important, I think, to talk to all four of them, and so that's what we've set out to do. And Larry's been kind enough to come in and talk a little bit about his first entry into elective office and kind of why county commissioner and why 2020, Larry. Welcome.
Well,
first, and then
thank you.
why 2020 and
Yeah.
why the county commissioners.
Well, in 2020, of course, there was an open seat, and I didn't want to run against an incumbent. It's a non-political position, I think. It's mostly budgetary, and so I thought that would be a good position for me. I'm a businessman, first and foremost. That's what I've done for 42 years.
Right. So, so the it's so long ago, I don't even know if it's relevant anymore, but I was a commissioner for 8 years, so I know a little bit about the job. I know it's changed a lot. One of the things I found fascinating about the job and learned over the years is there's kind of, in my mind, three elements. There is, as you said, the legislative or budgetary element. You do the county appropriation. But I also think there are two other areas that I found very important in being a commissioner, and one is the ability to build consensus and work within the other elected officials. And then the other is the purely administrative. Like, there are certain things that you're in charge of and you need to run. Now, without going controversial on you, they shut down the county home and they've leased out the landfill, so that's changed a little bit. But there still is that business management of certain operations of the county. So maybe touch on those various roles of building consensus with the other elected officials, and then your budgeting experience, and then kind of, what have you run, in your life that gives you the experience to be responsible for, running, because you are the administrative agency and a whole bunch of stuff. So, anyways, hang a question on that speech.
I've run our business for the last 29 years over in Bucyrus. It's a family business, and just like the Napa store here in town.
Right.
But it's pretty much a lot the same. I've done that on church finance committee. We've done the same things. We work with the budgets.
Sure.
and make sure we don't spend more than we have.
Sure. How do you build that rapport with the other elected officials? Try to understand their. I never thought, and don't think that the county recorder asks for things in the budget just to ask for things. So how do you get to know the needs of those various offices, and then annually be one of three folks budgeting for the succeeding year?
Just pretty much common sense. Just ask the questions. I get along with everybody. I'm not confrontational whatsoever.
Right.
And I can get along with just about anybody.
Right.
But I could, if you would call and ask a question, if I had to come over, I'd come over.
Gotcha.
but I deal more one-on-one with people. That's what we do.
Yeah, I remember it was mostly lawyers or judges that made, and I was just a kid, some might say. Still am a lot of ways. But anyways, when the commissioners would assert their authority, the judge would say, well, they don't call this the commissioner's house, it's the courthouse. It's like, yeah, you're probably right. So I think that's been one of the strengths, quite honestly, over the past few years within county government is the way in which the court system and the administrative parts of county government seem to be functioning pretty harmoniously. And so, any plans when elected, how you would fine tune that, or would you pretty much work with the commissioner's office and the court system similar to what's happening?
I believe that's the way you'd have to approach it. And gonna have to learn on the job a little bit, I'm sure, because I know fund budgeting is different than looking at a P&L for a business, I'm sure. So,
Right, that is true. How do you balance the needs and the desires of the law enforcement part of county government? Which is a different way of saying is there any hope or plan to try to stop or slow down the growth of the jail and all that goes with managing the jail? Any thoughts on that, or it's just like that's a given, we just have to?
It's pretty well, a lot of that's statutory, you have to.
Right, I think, and I suppose that's right. So I think the people in the court system or in law enforcement wouldn't fear that you would come in and rip up everything and go. Yeah, I think I think that's important to know. Those are necessary needs, and clearly the only people who are holding folks in the county, cities have jails, even holding facilities, is the sheriff's department. So I think that's necessary. What about working with other local government officials? If I made the case that the commissioner's office have been relatively inactive in communicating with or soliciting ideas from the cities, that's my opinion. Do you agree, disagree, mildly? So my premise is that the commissioners have been difficult to reach, and if you go from Galleon over to the commissioner's office and you have an appointment, they'll meet with you. But any plans to be able to be willing to be more accessible? That might be me just to kill it.
I intend to be totally accessible.
Right. By what means? By coming over?
By phone, by coming over. That's the way I work.
Right.
If there's a problem, that's what I do. That's what we do all day long. We solve problems. So.
Sure, that's true. And nobody comes in, and people don't come in. What's common about what you do in terms of auto parts and whatnot, and government is nobody comes in here if their cars, if the equivalent of their car's working fine. They all come in, they've got a problem. And frequently they don't know how to accurately diagnose what the problem is. And a lot of times you help them understand what's wrong with their car.
And I pretty much already know, most of the township officials. And,
right.
And I know most of Galleon City Council.
Right.
The majority of you.
Right. Well, so the one thing that I think it would be a good practice that we'd be interested in, meaning the city of Galleon, or as mayor's office, is meeting on some regular basis, the mayors, county commissioners, trustees to the extent they want to be involved, and open up a discussion about how we do things better.
That's what I thought. Even if you had just, one commissioner and a mayor and, maybe one township trustee, off each township.
Right.
Just get a little, just meet for coffee, whatever.
Right, that had been mentioned before, and I think you would find that the idea of just meeting and having a conversation, you probably start there. I don't disagree with that, but I think there are a year or two of monthly meeting topics of things that we need to address, that successfully addressing them is real important to how successful the community is in the future. Give you an example, and whether the commissioner should play a lead role in that is, what are we gonna do with the sewer system? County-wide, city-wide, how do we get drinking water to the more rural areas? I think we all know that dealing with the EPA becomes increasingly complicated, and so citing septic systems, wells to a certain extent, but smaller communities. So, seems to me that utility, the building out of utilities, whether they're municipal or they become, I'm gonna say attacked, it almost, but from Morco from the south on water, or from Lorraine, or whatever they call Huron County's Rural Water Authority. It seems as though the absence of a plan prevents us from anticipating what we're gonna do in the future. So I'm speechifying here, folks, so I don't wanna do that, but that would be an example of how we extend utilities logically. I think the effort to run water to North Robinson by the city of Bucyrus out along Old 30, and it's been tremendous success. You sometimes wonder from the North Robinson Colonel Crawford community where they would be at if that hadn't happened back then. And so the need to do that's real important. Recently, they had some discussion about extending water out to Osceola, and that kind of never congealed. And I'm not sure exactly why, but it seems to me that some plan on the extension of water and sewer, I think, is pretty important.
Right.
Hey, what about the landfill? Well, heck, I used to think that the landfill would outlive me, so I didn't have to worry about the mess I made back in the 80s and early 90s with the landfill. I'm not sure if that's the case. So, do you know of longer term plans, like over the next 3 decades, of how we maintain solid waste disposal?
That'll be an issue.
Yeah, and
it sounds like they've increased the tonnage, so its usable life is gonna be shortened by quite a bit. So.
That's true, and there's some discussion over here in Galleon. I don't want to pick a fight with Rumpke. They'll make a fight for you when you got there, but it seems to me that when your garbage hauler runs the landfill and has designs on the recycling center, is that where we want to be? Do we want to be totally beholden to Rumpke to pick up the garbage? I mean, Bucyrus runs their own system. We have private haulers here run the landfill and run the recycling center. I don't know if y'all have thought much about that, or you see some concerns about that, or how do you maintain ownership control over it? So
it doesn't sound totally fair right now the way it is, and I know
right.
our county pays, a higher fee than the out of counties.
That's true. I do understand it, but I don't understand it. It is one of the things that happens when you have a private operator running the landfill with the underlying ownership. Question I've been asking about, and something that if you get elected to look into, is the extent to which the county general fund is supported by the tipping fees that come off the landfill. And so one of the dilemmas that you might find is that, well, yeah, we need that non-in-county garbage, that out-of-county garbage, to be able to generate enough volume, but where does the where does the fees go? And I think what you'll find is that the fees go to support the county general fund. The question I have, I'll hang a question on this one, is will you look at what, to make sure that we have sufficient money for closure costs and post-closure costs? Been away from it for a while, but that's been something that I understand is not, it hasn't been fully worked out. So once the landfill closes, the revenue coming in to pay for the closure costs, seems to me that those dollars should be already collected and put on reserve so that there isn't a scramble down the road when the landfill is exhausted.
That makes good sense, yeah.
So without getting into telling you how to do it once you get there, I think there's some concerns that we have about solid waste. It's a big operation, and it gets into this management of the business side. And I guess I gotta agree with you that somebody with a business background has an understanding that would be valuable. And I don't know if that's been present, although I could pick a fight with 3 or 4 other individuals in the county. The record of former commissioners in business for themselves has been pretty shaky, and I think it'd be real positive to have a successful business person.
We've been there a long time.
Yeah, so I won't. That's my baggage.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I don't put that on Larry's shoulders. So solid waste is a big thing. The relationship between the sheriff's department, the commissioner's office, anything that about that you would do specifically, same, different?
No,
Does that seem to be
I'm pretty much pro law enforcement.
Okay,
so,
good.
yeah.
So what about, that's a simple answer, what about economic development? A topic that's been discussed, what the proper role of the commissioner's office, what the proper role of city government is in trying to have a constructive, successful development environment. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm supportive of the Crawford Partnership.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a good organization, and I know it's private and public both, and there's good people on the board, and I think that's the way we need to go, because we need an educated workforce that can take a job should a plant decide to locate here.
Right.
We need a workforce, and then they're gonna need affordable housing to live in.
Yeah, but that's really true, Larry.
So
I think, just at and there's been discussion at the city level about what level of support the taxpayers should have for this private nonprofit organization. My take on it is that if anything, we don't put enough horses in the team to pull sufficiently. And so there's been some discussion over the past few years, and I think that the record shows there's been a reduction in support by the commissioner's office of the partnership. And so I don't know if you're supportive of it, that's good. Not knowing all of their budget constraints, you'd have to be there to know it, but I guess what I'm saying is that we need to make sure we're putting enough money into it to get the results that people expect. And if you only put half the money you need to be successful in it, and then some county commissioners or some city officials step back and say, well, partnership's not very successful. Well, you only gave them half the fuel they needed to get to whatever. So anyways, I think it's good to hear that there's a 2030 planning process that is just initiated. Would you, as commissioner, or just as Larry Schmidt, community resident, can you see yourself involved in that? What are we gonna do over the next 10 years to be, to move ahead that much more?
Yeah, and if Crawford County doesn't grow, some of these people who work in the factories and places here in town, they don't live here. We'd
Yeah.
like them to live here.
Yeah, that's true. And you mentioned housing, I think there's a general understanding
Yeah.
that we need to address,
Yeah.
housing and, some of that is going to take place in unincorporated areas and some will take place
Mhm.
right at the edge of town and it's been a while, since annexation issues have been controversial in the commissioner's office. If you, we've done a few little onesie-twosie annexations here in Galion. Do you have a view on what's the role of commissioner's office when it comes to extending utilities and annexation or non-annexation?
Well, I think if it comes back to us in the form of, tax dollars, property taxes and income taxes and so on, I mean, we need to grow revenue. I mean, the revenue's, I think, kind of flat, declining, and
Right.
expenses are going up.
Right,
That doesn't last very long.
right, right.
From a business point of view, you'd be out of business.
Right, I agree with that. Any thoughts on what you as a local official or us as a group of local officials can do to get the attention of the General Assembly? I mean, a lot of the current township financial problems and some of the issues that the cities are having and the counties are having result from losing significant state funding over the past 8 or 9 years. Any thoughts on what could be done to do more than just complain about how
Yeah.
Columbus has billions on reserve and we're scrambling to a certain extent
Right.
at each other's throats over things like EMS, in large part because resources have dried up.
Right.
Any thoughts about what the commissioners could do to communicate that more effectively to our state reps, senator and state rep?
I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I mean, it would require more work but yeah, I agree that it needs to be done.
Yeah,
And I'd take it on.
right, I think that this goes back a long time, to maybe surprisingly for the older people that might be watching, here comes a Tom O'Leary compliment of Randy Weston. Who'd have thought we'd all live long enough for that. But I tell you, Randy was really awesome on constituent work, and he took seriously the office hours that he made time for. He came to the local communities in a way that I think it was the right thing to do and might be something we would encourage but to my knowledge, that doesn't happen now, does it?
No.
I mean, it really seems like for every time and I would say the commissioners are much more visible over here in the Galion area. But it seems to me that if you came over here as commissioner 3-4 times a year on scheduled appointments, and a couple of them nobody came to them, well, we'd find something to converse about. But just being here, available, I think is a positive, and if some are dry runs, so be it. But, it's something that we don't see much in Galion, and that is the presence of county officials. And so any thoughts about willingness to come over and go to the library or come to City Hall to be
Sure.
available?
Sure. I've even thought about having, as long as you advertised them in advance, you could have the commissioner meetings in Galion. You could have it in Crestline. You could do like Kasich did.
I think it's a really neat idea.
Kasich did that with his State of the State. He'd move it, to different towns, and I know as long as you have to advertise in
Sure.
advance.
What's interesting is like that. I'm glad Larry came in and chat, because I was like looking for something that Kasich did right, and he was here.
There you go.
That was a good thing. Anyways, that's just a never mind opinion. But it's been tough in local government over the past 8 years and didn't really see much difference out of this first budget under the new administration, so maybe that will change, but our jobs as local officials are made more difficult when the resources aren't coming in the way they quote unquote used to be. So anyways, I think commissioners coming over here is a really good idea. I believe that we
I
both
like it.
the block grants, which are federal dollars, come through the state. That was changed in the last handful of years, and from the point of view of the cities are involved. The decisions are made in the commissioner's office, and we the way it is managed is I'm not real happy with it. We're noticed through the paper about public meetings. We didn't get an email or phone call saying, hey, the public meeting's coming up on such a date. So I guess what I'm saying is, are you interested, willing to be more accessible and provide more information
Absolutely.
to the local governments about distribution of their funds?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as you were to talk to other mayors and other communities, it's not the fact that we have to get money every single time it's distributed, but knowing what it's going to in some process.
Right.
I think it is real positive. The issue one, the infrastructure that's been around for 30 years or more, that distribution of funds, I think, is a good model for working with local governments but shutout's a little too dramatic. Say we've been shut out, but we've not even been noticed through a letter to tell us what the commissioners funded for the most recent block grant cycle. Kind of problematic.
Yeah, and that kind of information should be known. I mean,
Yeah.
You should know why the decision was made and what decision was made.
Right. And I imagine you run into some initial logistical objections to taking the commissioners' sessions outside of the courthouse. Logistical kinds of concerns. There might be a technical issue has to be worked out, but I think that's a really good idea.
I think it'd be a good
the idea
idea.
of coming out, and that's being accessible and available is something that from the point of view of the cities, we could use a little bit more of. Is there a particular issue or something that after 2 years or 4 years of Commissioner Schmidt in office, we would identify with what you're trying to accomplish, or is it more that I want to kind of go in and do a good job overall?
That's exactly it. I want to be the best commissioner I can be.
Right. Do you have an agenda though of particular things of particular
No,
importance?
I'm mainly just a stickler for budgets. I like to follow a budget. I don't like to see parentheses and red ink and.
Sure. The one of the more complicated budgets that my experience with county government is the human services budget, or the job and family services. An interest in digging into that and providing, because I think that's a real important role that the commissioners can play. And I'm not sure how actively they've been involved in that. So any thoughts about public assistance part of it, or the child welfare part of it?
The child welfare side of it that's something that touches me. We adopted our 3 children through the county.
You did?
Yeah.
That's neat.
And that is a big thing.
Yeah.
And there's so many kids today that through the drug problems with the incarceration or overdoses, they're affected through no fault of their own. And there's going to need to be special attention there down the road. I mean, through the juvenile courts and so on, and they're going to be at risk.
Not that you had to advertise that, but I didn't know that about Larry at all. That you adopted 3 children, and through the welfare department or children's services.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat that what you realize, what oftentimes a lot of prospective, interested foster parents or people interested in adoption is the issues that sometimes those children come with. And it generally takes a special person to be able to deal with that. I think many people think of adoption as that little baby that they got, and more often than not, when they're adopted through the county, they're not little babies.
No.
And what the expression I used and affectionately used was broken teapots. Many times the kids that you have that aren't fortunate enough to be adopted, especially or sometimes have more involved issues, is that they have special needs based on the stuff that they've been exposed to and had to live through early on. So that's, how old are they? Are they minors or?
Well, they were 2, 4, and 11 when we adopted them
Yeah.
about 20-some years
Isn't
ago.
that cool? So they're like on the other side of, they're all adults and stuff. And
the youngest just turned 30.
yeah, that's good.
So
Yeah, well, that's neat. It's like you're doing the grandparent
Yeah.
or the,
Yeah.
I think one of the things I learned as a commissioner, I was chatting earlier about this, is some of the folks that I was commissioner with. And Chuck Crawl was a fellow that I was commissioner with. He has a large family. And I had little kids, and I had this notion that, once they're 18, they're on their own, we'll be, and so Chuck was a great dad. His girls and his son would come through the door of the commissioner's office, and he would just move to meet their needs. And I found that really instructive, and that's true. But so that experience since you did that, have you kept an eye on or some attention to how things in child welfare are going? And
I still pay a lot of attention to it.
yeah, and then you start at a really advanced state if you're elected, knowing a lot about the system. It's not somebody else's system. It's something that you grew up in to a certain extent. As parents, young parents become, you grow up more, I think, from being a parent than being a kid.
Oh,
but we won't digress into that philosophy. Anything about the child welfare system now that you've seen that you might want to add to? I'll give you an example of what I think. Here's kinship care, or this notion of grandparents or aunts and uncles raising kids. That seems to me to be something that state government's interested in, and therefore kind of county government's interested in, kind of ebbs and flows. And it looks like right now forming kinship groups and working with those people, those surrogate parents, either till mom and dad get the crap back together, or if they're totally out of the scene as they go through the next 10, 15 years of raising their grandkids.
Right.
Anything that I can tell you'd be supportive of expanding that. Anything that you can see that needs to be done in that area of expanding kinship, what they call kinship care.
I don't know what the commissioner's role would be other than funding,
Right,
but I would be, that would definitely be a plus.
The one thing I was scold is not the right word, but the budgeting is one thing, but I think giving guidance to the way the programs go, I think is a real important role. To simply say to the JFS director, don't, do a good job, don't do anything wrong. I think that the county better than, or as well as they do, and input on how you can reach out to these substitute surrogate caregivers, these grandparents who are doing something that they never imagined.
Give them the resources they need, and they're going to be future citizens. These children, they're going to be in the school systems, and so you got to give them everything you can give them to help them succeed.
Yeah, I used to think respite care was a goof, meaning that every 6 months or so that there'd be some way to get these grandkids off and, away for the weekend, get the people who are making that decision, sacrifice maybe, freed up so that they can go do some things.
Right.
And I think that's something that maybe is starting to happen again, but I would encourage you as commissioner to send a clear message to the JFS that let's do all that we can to assist those people. Let me think. So your approach would be to go in without a particular agenda, but to sort of play on, but reach back into your life experience and apply those things.
Right. I'm a listener. I'm more of a problem solver. You come to me with a problem, and that's what I try to do, is always try to solve the problems.
Yeah, that is the how often in life do you find many people are good at problem identification? I can tell you what's wrong.
Yeah.
For commissioner, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
I think that happens. And rarely do people come through the door, whatever door it is. Hey, we got a problem. I got a solution. So I think that approach, that let's not get paralysis by analysis. All we're gonna do is talk about the problem. Enough already. Let's work on some solutions.
That's right.
If that's what you're about, I think it's that and building consensus are those are traits that will really enable you to be successful commissioner.
Right.
Because what I found on the people side, the human services side, is that the issues tumble to government because they're difficult for a family to solve or an individual to solve.
Uh-huh.
So you'll find yourself at the bottom of the chute, collecting problems that tend to be difficult without any obvious solution. And so somebody who is a problem solver by temperament or that's just who they are, I think I'd have to say is really valuable.
Yeah.
Really valuable in being a successful commissioner. The rural areas, and we didn't talk much yet, and let's spend a minute or two before we finish up about this EMS, countywide EMS. Do you see a role for the commissioners, or would you see a role for yourself to go from where we are, not a complete, it's one thing about it, it's not complete and it's not perfect how we're doing it now, so there is room for problem solving.
Yeah.
You see you as an active participant in trying to resolve some of these issues of availability of ambulance in that joint fire district.
I think
Talk with us a little bit about that.
I think if the townships want the help, they'll ask. I think right now, they want the commissioners to kind of butt out a little bit.
Yeah, I think the county
To be
wants,
honest with
you're
you.
right, Larry, the county-wide effort to
Yeah.
solve it was not well received.
Yeah.
I didn't agree with what was proposed, but you gotta give them at least a little credit for trying.
Yeah, and I think the solutions are probably out there, but you need to listen to the people that, the townships that, that have got the problem, that are gonna have the problem. What do they think it's gonna take to solve it?
Right, I agree, while I agree with that, the other part of it is that we believe in the Galleon area that our relationship with Polk Township can be a model. I have no interest in shoving that down the rest of the county's throat, but sometimes that you look for the solution to a problem in a place that doesn't have much of a solution, instead of just driving 8 miles east and talking with ways that we've addressed that issue, not solved it entirely. And we would have an impossible time serving Cranberry and Likens Townships or the community. But it seems to me that a cooperative effort with the townships and the municipals, I think, is the way to go.
That would be good.
And I hope that the city of Bucyrus begins to look at ways in which they may be the best solution to fill in that gap versus bringing in the private ambulance service. So it'll be interesting to see. My friend Jeff Reeser and some of the people I would describe as friends on council, that'll be a real challenging a thing for them to accomplish. And I guess Galleon in the Polk Township areas will keep doing what we're doing and want to be part of the conversation. But yeah, I know the commissioners, they may feel that way. You get in there, it's like, man, the last thing we're gonna do is stick our nose into that. We ended up with a big shiner and a big bloody nose doing it last time. But clearly there are times when people in the rural areas are a long ways away from being able to get that immediate response.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to just because you were pushed back or individual commissioners didn't get the reception, there's gotta be a way to resolve it.
Yeah,
So
let's start with what they got in common and.
Yeah, and I think some of the trustees, you don't have to own this, but some of the trustees are more focused on a solution, and some are more concerned about what it's gonna cost them.
Mhm.
And I think they've gotta marry those two. You can't provide quality, improved service, and have it be the cheapest around. So I think that needs to be realized.
Yeah, the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah.
you know, but they,
Right.
but there's gonna be issues, I think, coming forward.
Right, and what I would say without telling you how to do this is that a problem is the way in which state government has turned the tap back on all local governments and created this scramble for funds when there's not enough for anybody to get along. That is something that I would hope that cities could give voice to the commissioners, and we could make clear to our representatives that the status quo can't persist. Yeah, I love it when they say, well, the state budget's really tight this year. Been at this almost 40 years, I've never seen a city budget that wasn't tight.
That's right.
Or a county budget that wasn't tight. So that's sort of welcome to our world when it comes to being challenged to have insufficient resources. What else? What haven't we covered that you think's important for voters to know over the next few weeks, up until the March primary, about how you do things your way, same, different than others? What do we need to wind up by mentioning, kind of the why vote for Larry Schmidt, if you will? Please.
Well, I think I'm capable of doing the job. I don't think
Uh-huh.
there'll be a problem there. And I intend to be cooperative and transparent and work with the county and the cities and the villages and the townships and, whatever it takes, because we're gonna be one county. And like I said, mostly through transparency. I think that's where a lot of it. You need to know why we make the decisions,
Mhm.
how we arrived at the decisions, and make sure, you're happy with that, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's really the motivation of doing this, is to try to get people who are in the habit of watching this, or when they know about it, will click on our website and download is real difficult to communicate. The number of outlets of traditional media just are lesser and lesser, and I'd said to Matt when we were talking about the idea of doing this, is for sure, despite their best efforts, the Telegraph Forum article is gonna have a couple, 3, 4 column inches and a picture that you might not even be able to identify
Right.
yourself. There's so much more to be known about why each one of you are interested in running, what you could bring to the commissioner's office, that I'm hoping. I think this has been another successful exercise or effort in allowing Larry Schmidt to tell the people who live stream and view our stuff what you're about and what your goals are as commissioner. So I really appreciate you coming in and It's all gonna happen really fast, so.
Yes, it is.
I'm looking down, he doesn't have tennis shoes on, folks, but it looks like he could walk a few miles in the shoes that he has,
Yep,
so.
we can get there.
Save, work your energy, you'll be dead dog tired by the, middle of March, but best of luck, and
Alrighty.
thanks a bunch for coming in.
All righty, well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yep,
All
good
right,
talking
Larry.
with you.
All right. Okay, thanks, folks. We'll talk to you soon.